Hey, everybody. Glad you were here. Glad those that are tuning in, watching us right now. As we continue in our series on building a better marriage, building a better relationship, titled The Fixer Upper, a Marriage Project, or The Marriage Project, I want to bring us to our next important area to study, to go into, and to understand. If you've been tuning in every single week, we've been using a garden as the analogy for a healthy relationship. Because whatever you sow in a garden, whatever work, whatever effort you put into it, that's what you're going to get out of it. So it is with a marriage. First week, we talked about the importance of digging up and getting out the stones and the junk that are in that ground, because you cannot plant a garden on regular ground. You have to get the stones out of it, the rocks. And that, to us, represents the things that we brought up, that we rather brought with us into our relationship, the things that are stored, that are buried, the stones that are buried deep into our hearts, things that were poured into us, things that were put into us when we were most likely very young. In other words, if you bring junk in, garbage into a relationship, you will pollute that relationship. You will. As I've said many times, hurt people hurt people. Damage people damage people. And unfortunately, life has damaged us, life has hurt us, and we bring those hurts in, we bring those attitudes in, we bring those insecurities in, we bring those fears in, we bring them in, and we never deal with them. And I said that probably the number one reason, and there's no doubt in my mind, the number one reason why marriages fail was because they were doomed to fail from the beginning. Okay, and I titled our first teaching, Doomed Before I Do. In other words, before we ever walked down the aisle, before we ever made our vows, our marriage was doomed. Why? Because of the junk that we brought into it. But I emphasize, I'm not saying that you're bad, that you're wrong, that you're an evil person. I'm saying that you're a normal person. And growing up, we've had junk put into us, poured into us. And we don't know what to do with it. We don't know how to deal with it. And so it's imperative that we're honest with ourselves about the things that are on the inside of us. And I said right away, I said, most people are going to tune out after hearing that first message. And sure enough, 50% of the people in week 2 didn't tune in. 50%. Why? Because they don't want to deal with that truth, that there's things on the inside of you or things on the inside of us that pollute relationships. And in many cases, they've been going on for generation after generation after generation. So that's the number one thing. If we don't deal with those stones, those issues that we have on the inside of us, there's no hope for an improved relationship. So you got to dig out, break up that fallow ground. Then number 2, you got to plant seeds. Then number 3, we have to water those seeds. Right? Very, very important. And then last week, we talked about the importance of maintaining our relationship and the maintenance work that needs to be done. And that's super important. And I want to encourage you to go back and review. If you haven't watched each one of these teachings, go back and watch every single one of them. But today I want to talk about what I have written right here, building a fence. And I've known people over the years that have worked really, really hard, labored really hard to get a good garden. And I mean, they broke up that ground and they were diligent in planting and watering, and they would go out there and they were waiting for the fruits or the tomatoes or the zucchini, whatever, the peppers, and they see them, they're excited, they can't wait to pick them, and they go out there one day to pick them, and somebody got to them first. The little critters that are in the area, right? Happens all the time. Those critters come in, those, whether they be squirrels, whether they be raccoons or groundhogs, or up here in this area where we live, deer, okay? They come in, moose up in this area over here, they come in. You have moose in Lincoln Park? Wow. They come in and they eat those fruits. See, you're waiting for them to ripen. Guess what? So are they. They've been checking them out. And the only way to guard against those critters that are out there is you got to put a fence around it. It's the only way. So it is with our marriage. So it is with our relationship. We could try to do everything right, but if we don't put a fence around us to protect us, if we don't understand that there are forces out there in the world that are out to try to destroy us, then we can be caught off guard. And I remember talking to somebody one time, he was caught completely off guard that all his plants were going to be destroyed by critters that were out in the fields around them. Totally caught off guard and totally discouraged. So we need to put a fence around. I want to talk about that fence in just a moment. I remember a couple of years ago now, and I was doing a wedding, and I shared about the difference between glue and screws. Like, what a romantic thing to share at a wedding, wasn't it? Glue and screws. But it was actually a very good thing to share at the wedding, because I want to share it right now because I want to apply it to us in relationships. I read an article one time, and I was reading about how they make furniture, pieces of furniture. And when they put furniture together, and if you ever watch the show on TV, you'll see it on TV, they'll take two pieces of wood, and before they screw them together, they'll do something. They'll take glue, and they'll run a bead of glue between the two pieces of wood. They'll put the two pieces of wood together, then they'll screw the wood together. And they do that over and over and over and over again. Now, I'm a non-glue kind of guy. In other words, I'm impatient. So if I'm building something, I'll just put an extra screw in there if I have to, and okay, it's all done, because sometimes it takes a little bit longer to put that glue over there, and get a little messy sometimes too. But then as I'm reading this article, I got to be honest with you, I was a little bit blown away by what I read in that article. And this article said, it's not the screws that hold the furniture together. It's the glue. And in my mind, I'm thinking, really? But it's those screws. You use, you got that heavy-duty manly machinery. I'm gonna screw that over there, hammer with a nail. Oh, man, it's great. How tough it is. They said, no. They said what really holds furniture together is the glue. They said the screws just hold it in place until the glue hardens, and it's that glue that keeps it together. And then they went and they had some kind of bench or a chair, and they grabbed it, and they were able to move it a little bit. And they said, see what happens when there's no glue put in? They say after a while, the hold of the screw gets loose, and it starts to go off balance and shaky. They said if there was still glue in here, you wouldn't be able to do this with the chair. And boom, that was like a revelation that went off on the inside of me. We as a society in relationships, we focus on the screws, and we put little value or interest in the glue. And the reality is, it's the glue that holds a relationship together, not the screws. What are the screws in a relationship? And I kind of said a little bit of this last week, I think, or the week before. Well, I got her a beautiful ring. Those are screws. A beautiful dress for the wedding. We had a nice honeymoon, man. Those are all screws. They don't keep a relationship together. They just hold it and organize it in place. Well, we got a new house. We got a car. Those are all screws. But they will only last for so long that all of a sudden you're going to start hearing squeaking going on. And the reason why the furniture is squeaking, because it's moving, because the screws are starting to come loose. And that's what happens in relationships. Relationships start to come loose. And you know what causes them to come loose? Life. Use. I'm not talking anything about abuse. I'm not talking that, you took a hammer and started beating on it. I'm talking day-to-day usage causes those pieces of furniture to start to become loose because of the pressure you put on it. And if all you have are the screws, well, I get up and I go to work every single day. I wash those are all screws. They're important, but they're screws. They're not the glue. Eventually, it's going to start becoming so shaky, so wobbly that you're not going to be able to want to sit on it. And eventually, it'll collapse. It'll break. That's how many, many relationships are, because we only focus on the screws. So what did I say was the glue? Well, the glue that really holds a relationship together is faith. That's what holds a relationship truly together. Now, some people are going to be watching, I don't want to hear a religious message. You need to hear what I'm about to say, because it's not just going to be religious, but you need to hear what I'm about to say. Because this is the key that holds things together. Okay? You have a husband as one board connected to another board who's a wife, and you may put a screw here, but what holds these two ultimately together? And that's God. Or really, it's our faith that holds those two boards together. Our faith is the glue that unites things and keeps them strong. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, most relationships, if not all relationships, are based upon emotions and feelings, right? This is the foundation of just about every single relationship. I fell in love. That's a feeling. I'm so happy when I was with that person. That's a feeling. I have so much joy. That's a feeling. I miss them when they're not. That's a feeling, okay? So relationships are primarily built upon emotions and feelings. And there's nothing wrong with those emotions or feelings. God gave them to us. But here's a big problem when the foundation of your relationship is emotions and feelings. Because you know what emotions and feelings do? They change all the time. They change like the weather. And you can't control the change that takes place. Because you know what? Life brings pressures. If you hear and paying attention last week, I said how life blows weeds into that garden, right? We didn't do anything. We didn't cause those weeds to come, but life blows weeds. Life blows pressures. Life brings critters to come into your garden and destroy your garden. And you didn't do anything about it. It's called life. You cannot stop life from happening. You cannot stop the pressures from life from happening. Stresses are going to come. And those stresses are going to press and put weight down on that, quote, piece of furniture. Well, when your foundation starts to become shaky, and if your foundation is emotions and feelings, eventually your foundation is going to become shaky. Because like I said, they change all the time. You know, you were in love. And then you got married a couple years later. Yeah, I love her. What happened? I asked that question 3 years earlier. You were in love. You started singing the theme from Love Boat. Wherever you went, it was like, woo, this is the greatest thing. Yeah, I love her. What happened? What happened is emotions change. Life situations change. Feelings change. All of a sudden now, as I said last week, you bring kids into the equation. You don't think children affect the emotion and the feelings that a man and a wife have for each other? Oh, absolutely they do. Why? Because they bring pressures. You don't think that, and I'm going to talk more about this next week, you don't think money and finances affect a relationship and affect emotions? Absolutely they do. They do all the time. And there are probably a list of 100 things that you could write down that affect emotions and cause emotions to sway and emotions to change. It happens all the time. It's why in most cases, smart people don't build their houses where there are going to be earthquakes and earthquake zones. Why? Because the house is going to fall down, because the ground is always shifting. Well, Pastor, what are we supposed to do if our emotions and our feelings, you're telling us they're going to change, and I'm telling you they're going to change? You're going to get angry at your spouse. You're going to be disappointed at your spouse. You might even hate your spouse. A lot of different feelings and emotions are going to come up. Well, one side of the coin, I've had many conversations over the years with people. And they said, well, I don't love her anymore. I said, yeah, no big deal. Don't worry, you'll get over it. And like, well, what do you mean? I go, love comes and love goes. As fast as it went, it could come back. Because emotions change all the time. See, we all know people who live their lives like this. Up and down, hot and cold. It's like they're bipolar. But they're just emotionally high and low, hot and cold, up and down all the time. So some people could go from week to week and change. Some people go from day to day. Some people go from hour to hour. And some people go from minute to minute. Up and down, up and down. Why? Because our emotions could change and fluctuate that quickly. Well, we don't have a chance, really, of settling in, of having a stable foundation if things are always moving, if things are always changing, if things are always switching. What we need is a stable foundation to put our emotions and feelings on top of. And that foundation, of course, is our faith. Now, what I have found amazing over 40 years in Christ, 35 years in ministry, is how few Christians have Christian relationships. Think about what I just said. Now, almost everybody in America, still the overwhelming majority of people in America consider themselves to have faith of some kind. Overwhelming majority. Don't listen to the news, what they say, because they want you to think that like you're the only person in the world that believes in God. No, the overwhelming majority of people still have faith. The problem is they never seem to apply their faith to their marriage. So I have seen countless times two Christians have an unchristian marriage. He'll come to church and he'll worship God, he'll serve God, he'll go home and curse out his wife. And you're like, how could that be? She'll be involved in 67 ministries in the church and go home and badmouth her husband and trash her husband. Or with her friends, trash her husband. And you're like, I don't understand. How could that be? For some reason, we don't apply or bring our faith into our marriage. And that's why it's always shaky and always up and down, because without faith, you're only relying upon emotions and feelings. That's all that's left to rely upon, emotions and feelings. And they're always going to sway. They're always going to change. There are too many things that happen in life that are going to cause them to go up and down, hot and cold. And again, I'm not saying you're a bad person if that happens. I'm just saying you're a normal person if that happens. People die unexpectedly that are close to you. Financial things happen unexpectedly that affected you. Right? We have children. Crazy things can happen with our children. They affect us. We have businesses. Negative things that can happen with our businesses. They affect us emotionally. They affect our feelings. We have friends that are there for us one day and then are stabbing us in the back the next day. Right? That happens all the time. Every single one of those things affect us emotionally. Every one of them. And again, if you think hard enough, you can write down a list of 100 more. But what keeps a marriage stable is our faith. That's what keeps a marriage stable. So I want to encourage you to learn how to apply faith to your marriage or to your relationship. Now, here's something else I've noticed too. If you don't apply it at the beginning of your relationship or in the formative years of your relationship or in the foundation pouring of your relationship, you almost never have it or apply it 20 years later, 30 years later. In other words, what you do in the beginning usually determines what happens 2 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later. So if you're not praying with your spouse when you're dating, chances are you're not going to pray with your spouse 5 years later. So that's why it's important to start early in your relationship by applying your faith. Now, what does faith do? Again, super important. I'm going to look at faith, and I've used this analogy in church in the past, like the banks of a river. If you take the banks of a river and you remove them, and then all of a sudden you have a flood or heavy rains or a storm that comes in. Heavy rain and storms are going to come into each and every one of life. All of a sudden that river is no longer a river. It becomes a lake. It becomes a swamp. And it starts doing great damage. As long as those banks are there, it steers the river around things, okay? Very rarely do you see a straight river for any great distance. Why? Because it's finding the path of least resistance. It's avoiding obstacles. And that's what your faith will do. Your faith will keep you going in the general right direction, and it will help you to avoid obstacles until you reach the sea. So if you have faith, it will help you not become a flood and a swamp. And what happens after a while with that water that just overflows? It starts to become stagnant because it's not flowing. It's not going anywhere. There's no movement or no life any longer in your relationship. And there are many relationships that become stagnant. They become stagnant because they're not flowing, they're not going anywhere, because there's nothing guiding it. See, banks of a river guide that river to its destination. Or another way to look at those banks, and we're going to now apply it to us and relationships, to ourselves personally, to relationships. Boundaries or borders or fences, I'm all talking the same thing. They do two things. They prevent you from doing things. Okay? They prevent you from doing things, and they propel you to do things. That's what faith does. Faith prevents you from doing things that your emotions want to do. Right? You could be upset, you could be angry, you could be hurt, and your emotions are going to want to do what? They're going to want to take that frying pan and hit him or her over the head. Or they're going to want to lash out with harsh, nasty, angry, painful words. I've been in countless counseling sessions where I could read the people's minds as they're getting so angry and upset. They're thinking, what's the most hurtful, painful thing I could say right now to my wife or to my husband? And then they just throw up the most painful, hurtful, spiteful thing in the world. It comes pouring out. This is your partner. This is the mother of your children, the father of your children. This is the one who you're supposed to be one with, and you're speaking to them like that? Well, I was hurt. Faith is the filter that goes over your mouth. How many people know people that have no filters? They just say anything that comes to their mind. And boy, oh boy, they go through life stepping in one pile of dog poo after another pile of dog poo. That's all they do. And you know what gets them there? It's because they're a blabbermouth. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you're way too young right now, okay? Because their mouth betrays them. Well, what really has betrayed them is their emotions and their feelings. It's betrayed them. They weren't walking in their faith, or they never brought their faith into the relationship, because their faith would have prevented them from saying that hurtful, harmful, spiteful thing. Why? Because my faith as a Christian compels me or propels me to love my wife and care for my wife. As the Bible says, as Christ loved the church. So my faith propels me in that direction. And at the same time, it prevents me from saying harsh and harmful and hateful and spiteful things. It prevents me because I know in my faith that there's life and death in the power of the tongue. I know that. I know James says, we went over this a couple of weeks ago, that, man, the tongue is like a flaming fire. It could set the whole world ablaze. I know that. I know I'm not supposed to speak to my children a certain way. Even though I want to, even though my emotions are screaming on the inside of me to lash out, It's my faith that's a boundary or a fence around my garden that prevents dangerous things from getting in. It's important. I know I'm not supposed to have that flirtatious conversation with that woman because my faith prevents me from doing that. Oh, my emotions, they want to do that. But our faith overrides or supersedes our emotions. Now, a problem that most people have, and I'm talking people who have faith is supposed to be the foundation upon which our emotions sit upon. In other words, our faith influences our emotions. Oh, I'm hurt, I'm upset, because I'm human, but my faith prohibits me from my upsetness, my hurt, from going off the charts. It stops it at a 2 on a scale of 1 to 10 instead of making it go to a 10. So my faith influences my emotions. That's how God made us, because God gave us emotions, right? God gave them to us. But God knew that emotions could be dangerous. Emotions can cause a whole lot of problems, man. So God also gave us a referee for our emotions. And our referee is our faith. And our faith comes in and says, blows a whistle, throws a flag, calls a foul, stop. Don't cross that line right there. Oh, but I want to. Don't cross that line over there. So it's our faith, or living our faith, that controls our emotions and prevents us from doing stupid things. Prevents us from saying stupid things. Prevents us from turning molehills into mountains. Prevents major explosions from happening. It's our faith that causes that. But unfortunately, in many people's lives, it's like this. It's been flip-flopped. Our emotions are guiding our faith. Our emotions are influencing our faith. Now, something happened and you're upset with your partner. That's okay. That's called life again. That happens. But now all of a sudden, am I going to forgive them? Well, if this was switched the other way, your faith would say, forgive them. But when your emotions are influencing your faith, your emotions say, no, don't forgive them. Make them pay. Make them suffer a little bit more. They deserve it. And now you just took a situation that was that big, you made it that big. You understand the difference? Our emotions are not supposed to guide or influence our faith. Our faith is supposed to guide and influence our emotions. Our faith is that referee. Our faith is that fence that goes around the garden and protects it from enemies from coming in, such as bitterness, such as anger, such as spite, such as jealousy. Again, there's a lot of critters that are out there that can't wait to go into your garden and destroy it and to eat the fruits that you're trying to produce. They can't wait to get there. So it's imperative that you put that fence up around it. It is. And I'll get to more of that in just a second. But also, as I said, our faith also propels us to do things that our emotions don't want to do. I'll tell you a personal story. No, hon, not that personal story. I just made that up. And many of you know this story. Years ago, my wife and I were going to teach a marriage seminar at Patty and Joe Statuto's house with a bunch of couples that were there. And, okay, we had to be there, say, 7:30, and I'm like, like most guys, I'm like this. Hon, we got to leave. We got to leave. Okay, I'll be right there. 5 minutes later. Hon, we're going to be late. Okay. Now, there's steam starting to come out of my ears a little bit over here. And I'm like, here's my thinking. I'm the pastor. I'm the teacher. I can't show up late at this meeting. So I walk into my bedroom, and what do I behold? All the clothes that my wife was just wearing are now lying on the bed, and she's in the bathroom in a whole different outfit. And I'm like this. What? Steam coming out of my ears right here. I'm like, I can't believe she's doing this to me right now. We're going to be late, and it wasn't like she was dressed in rags. And then I walk out, and I'm just like, I gotta get out of this bedroom. I kid you not, true story. And then she steps out into the hallway like this and goes, which shoe do you think matches better? I go, I don't care. Go in your bare feet. Put work boots on. We've got to get out of here. Let's go. She's like, oh, are we going to be late? No, I just yelled that 14 times. Okay. Now we're in the car and we're driving up there. And she's trying to talk to me. And I'm giving her not even one-syllable answers, half-syllable answers. Because she was wrong, and I needed to let her know about it. So she's asking me a question. I'm just grunting. Yeah. That's it. Wouldn't even look at her. Did I mention I was going to go teach a marriage seminar? Did I mention that? Okay. And the last thing I wanted to do was to let her off the hook and forgive her and let her get away with it or whatever. You know how stupid people think when you're emotionally out of control. I kid you not, the Spirit of God speaks to me out of left field, like on my shoulder. Like I had the little devil on one shoulder, and I had the angel on the other shoulder. Little devil was saying, don't let her get away with this because she's going to keep doing it over and over and over again. And you know what? She was wrong. You need to make her pay. But this little voice on this other shoulder speaks to me. You know what it says? You can forgive her anytime you want now. You could just let it go. I'm like, get thee behind me, Satan. I was like, and I didn't want to hear it. If I was alone in my living room and heard that, I'd be throwing a tantrum, stamping my feet. But I was driving a car, and I was too dangerous to do that. I didn't want to hear that. And then I heard it again. Anytime you want, you could just choose to stop being mad. I'm like, ugh. So I reached my hand over, and I took her by the hand, and I held her hand. And I started to squeeze real tight. No, I didn't do that. I took her by the hand, and I held her hand. And you know what happened to all my anger, all my frustration? It went away. That fast. That fast. Because I had found myself in a situation where I was encountering this. Either my emotions were going to control my faith, or my faith was going to control my emotions. And we're all going to find ourselves in that situation. Every single one of us. Dozens and dozens of times. And it's a decision that we have to make. And I thank God, literally, that I took her hand and I chose to allow my faith to override my emotions. Because we walked into the house holding hands, smiling, not with me around her neck. Oh, hi. Oh, we're here to preach about the love of God for marriage. No, we didn't do that. And it was all because of this little equation over here that I had to choose to put my faith. And my faith was that fence around my garden that stopped anger and bitterness from getting in and taking root and destroying a whole night. And who knows, destroying our marriage. Who knows what could have happened Because, all it takes is one seed to start something. But my faith propels me to forgive and let it go. It propels me. It forces me to, if I'm going to be honest with it. If I'm going to live by my faith, which we're supposed to do, it propels me. So it prevents me from doing things like, saying nasty things, but then also propels me to do the right thing, the goodly thing, and the godly thing, even when we don't want to do it. And that's why it's so important for us to guard our relationship with something like faith. Now, in Proverbs 22:28, here's our key verse for today. It says this: "Remove not the ancient landmarks which your fathers have put in place." Remove not the ancient landmarks. Now, I want to tell you that we live in a day and age, we live in a society that is controlled by a spirit, for lack of a better term, that has a bulldozer and wants to bulldoze every ancient landmark that our fathers have established. Wants to knock them all down. Wants to knock down every boundary, every border, every fence, and say, it's in the name of freedom or the name of diversity. They'll put any name they want after it, but the goal is all the same. We want to bulldoze any ancient landmark. Now, why are ancient landmarks or landmarks so important? I'll tell you why. Especially in ancient days, but we have them today. They're called fences or bushes or shrubs, whatever. But you knew where your land ended and your neighbor's land began because there was a mark there. There was some kind of landmark. So if you ever went out if you had a big farm with, 500 acres, and you drove out and you knew that your property went all the way to the river, and all of a sudden somebody had planted crops on your side of that river, you know right away something's wrong. Why? Because that landmark or that boundary was there. So landmarks or boundaries, they are there because they keep things in order. Do you hear what I'm saying? Order is so important. Now, as I've said many times, if you go to a soda machine and you see a sign that says out of order, what does that mean? It means it doesn't work. It means if you put money in there, you wasted your money. It's not going to work. Out of order. We have Glenn right here, a chiropractor. If a disc in your back goes out of order, you're going to be like Quasimodo, like this, walking around. Why? Because something went out of order. The Bible says, let everything be done decently and in order. Why? Because order makes things work. It keeps things on balance. Which is why there's a saying that fences make good neighbors. That's actually a saying. Because it stops them from going on your property and stops you from going on their property. Or it stops their dog from going on your property, and you know what I mean by the word going over there. It stops their leaves from blowing on your property. Right, Brother Dave? Brother Dave almost lost his salvation years ago because of neighbors' leaves blowing on his property because there was no fence in that area to stop it. Or how many of us have ever had a neighbor where they felt it's fine with the snowblower to blow all their snow from their driveway over into your driveway? Like, you thought that was a good idea? We just had 2 foot of snow. Now you've got 0 and I got 4. So when you have that fence there, it keeps things in order. And we have had faith and we have had traditions that have kept our country and our families in order for hundreds and hundreds of years. And you want to know what's sad? We're starting to lose every single one of those traditions. We're starting to lose every single one of those landmarks that gave order and meaning to our families. They're getting blown right away. For example, something that you might not even think twice about. I grew up that when the street lights went on in the summer, that meant something. What did that mean? Get home or you're dead. That was the other part. Because what's waiting for you when you get home? Dinner. That was it. We knew when those street lights went on, we went home. And when I say we, I meant the whole family showed up for dinner. And we did something that is, I'm finding out, abnormal today. We all sat at the dinner table together and ate. Well, what's the big deal? What's the big deal if you don't do that? Sometimes that's the only time your family gets to spend together throughout the day. It's important. It's a sign this is family time together. Do you know how many families don't eat together today? I mean, never. You might have 4 people in a family, they're all home, they all eat in 4 different rooms. That's not good. Because that's when we talk to each other. That's when we laugh with each other. Now, I grew up in a moderately religious family back in my day, back in the 60s and early 70s. But you know what we did every single day? Part of our traditions? We prayed over every dinner meal that we had. And again, we were not extremely religious people back in those days, but we prayed over every dinner meal that we had. Because everybody in the neighborhood prayed over their meal. That was normal. My kids, I don't think, have ever had one meal with mom or dad, and they've had thousands, where we didn't pray over our meal, including in restaurants. Doesn't matter. We pray. Even when my wife was in jail for that one weekend, we went there, we ate together, and we prayed. No, I didn't mention that she was in jail visiting me. I didn't mention that, but we're going to leave that part of the story out over there. We prayed. And you know what? That was part of our country's tradition. Nobody does that anymore. That landmark has been pulled away. Now when people sit down, if they do sit down together, a 186-inch TV is right over there for them to watch. There's 2 computers on the table. There's iPads, iMacs, iSpy, everything, and they're like this, doing this, eating, not even looking at each other. Put all those things away. Well, it's not important. Yes, it is. Our traditions are being just bulldozed right over, the landmarks. See, these are all part of the fence, along with our faith, that keeps our relationship and our family strong. I'm just giving you examples of how the whole country is going in the wrong direction. I remember being young, Easter meant you went to church. And you got dressed up. You got your Easter outfit a couple days in advance. And you were putting it on, and you fought that little tie as a boy, or that bow tie, whatever, and you got smacked upside your head so your teeth got loose in your mouth. Your mother didn't care. You just be quiet and put that tie on, and you're going to go to church, and you're going to smile, for Jesus is there. Ah! And we all did it. There wasn't a question. There wasn't, oh, I got a football game. I got a lacrosse game. Our parents would have laughed at us, laughed hysterically. Christmas, what did everybody do? We went to church as a family. Those days are gone. We sang Christmas carols. We even went around the neighborhood and sang Christmas carols, spreading our faith. It was fun. It was cold, but we had hot chocolate. We had cookies and stuff like that. Gone. Bulldozed right over. It was common for hundreds of years in Europe and the United States for families to sit together outside or in front of the fireplace and read Scripture together and pray together. For centuries, that was normal. That's gone. That's been bulldozed over. How many of us went to the Memorial Day parade as a family together? We went down there together. And we watched the great parade together that went by us. And we saluted the American flag every time it went by. And we all bought these little things, and we all had red, white, and blue hats or something all over us. We celebrated our country. That's gone. Nobody wants to do that anymore. Nobody. Why? Because all of our traditions, all of our landmarks are getting plowed down and plowed over. And it's affecting our society, and it's affecting marriages. Because those are the fence posts that go around and protect our relationship. There are traditions that we need to maintain. Our faith being number one on that list. Maintain our faith tradition. Maintain family time together. I'll tell you, my wife and I love to have family time. You know, and we'll just pick up a stray family if we have to, if our kids aren't around these days. And we'll just sit down out there in the street and we'll break open a board game. We'll play Monopoly with them, whether they want to or not. We're gonna have a family time with you, family, because we love it so much. I said last week and the week before that my wife and I used to, and we still do, I guess, try to always create family moments. Sometimes it's moments for just my wife and I, but then family moments too. Those are traditional things that we've always done. And they're all being lost right now. So I want to encourage you. You could dig up that fallow ground. You could get those stones out and deal with those issues. You could plant the right seed, water the seed. You could even maintain the garden. But if you don't put that fence around it, things in this life, things in this world are going to come in and try to bring destruction to that garden. Don't put your faith in the screws of life. Hey, we got a big screen TV. Hey, we got a $60,000 car. Those are just screws. Put your faith in the glue. Because when the storm comes, when the emotions start going up and down, those screws aren't going to do the job. It's the glue, it's your faith that will keep things together. There are people that are watching this right now. I'm going to bring this to a close. And your relationship is dead, it's over, you've quit, you're just going through the motions. You don't even know why you're watching this right now because you don't want to watch it. You're doing it just to shut up and satisfy your spouse. And on the inside of you, you feel nothing. Feelings and emotions can change. They can go cold, they can also go hot. But I don't want to keep going on. That's why we have faith. Faith keeps us walking when we want to quit. Faith causes us to get up when we've fallen down. Faith causes us to have hope when we're afraid to have hope, because hope brings pain and hope brings getting hurt. Don't lose your faith. Faith is a tool that God has given you and me to keep us as that river flowing and going in the right direction and cause us to get to that place where we need to get to. That's what our faith is. And faith is that fence that protects our garden. I want to encourage you to have traditions for your family to follow, and don't break them. Hold on to them as much as you can, because those are all fence posts that protect you, and sometimes you don't see the value in it. Trust me, their value is great, and the value is there. Praise God. I hope you got something out of this. I hope you meditate upon this. I hope you think about this. And if you've gone your life without really applying faith to your marriage or faith to your relationship, I want to encourage you, start applying faith. Go to a church where they're going to teach you the Word of God and teach you faith and model faith. Find a church, because not every church does. Find a church that promotes faith. And I'm telling you, it could be the difference between death of a marriage and life to a marriage. God bless you. See you next week, okay? Bye-bye.